Hi, welcome to this week's edition of Blues Talk. We're again, John, Dave and myself are going to look back over Ireland's poor performance against Argentina last week, Leinster's poor performance against Clonetly, look forward to all of the semi-finals in the Rugby World Cup, and of course our Leinster's game at the weekend too. So boys, 43-20, pretty comprehensive defeat.
Well, actually, I've decided that we're not going to talk about rugby this week because it's just too depressing. So what I've decided is we'll do an album review show. And this week
I thought you were going to do a hairdressing
No.
review. Lovely comb up we have.
Look, how long does it take to say 10 out of 10? This week we're going to discuss the new John Grant album. We're going to discuss the new Saint-Germain album. And we're going to discuss the reissue of Television by Marky Moon and White Final. John.
Okay, let's get back to the rugby side.
Yeah, it was... there was a whole load of stuff that just everything that could go wrong did go wrong, and then when we thought we were coming back into it, everything that could go wrong at that point went wrong again. I mean, there's been an element since the match of kind of a reaction that has been, as Eddie O'Sullivan would say, running around with their heads on fire and throwing babies out with bathwaters. And we don't want to do that. I mean, there is a sober reflection, and things did go wrong in the match. But I don't think we should go crazy. I mean, Irish rugby is not in the Jacks. We've just won 2 Six Nations back to back. We've beaten some serious Southern Hemisphere opposition in the autumn internationals. So just to say, we're not at the point we were in, say, 2007.
No.
Okay. But to counter that, look at the quality of the Six Nations.
Yeah.
France are the worst French team you've ever seen. Italy have won 4 games in the 4 Six Nations since the previous World Cup. England are a shadow of themselves. Scotland, they I think won 5 games in those 4 years. So, like the standard of quality of opposition that we're playing. Then you also mention the sort of beaten Southern Hemisphere teams, which is fair enough. But when we go down on tour at the end of our season in the summer, how much effort is really put into those tours? Obviously. You know what I mean? Like we were beaten 60-0 by New Zealand a couple of seasons ago. Are those South African and Australian victories really the same quality as if you're playing them in the World Cup?
Possibly not, but like you said, do we go down there? The seasons are structured so much differently, right? Because it's the end of their season in November, but they've had the sprint of Super Rugby. And the guys who are in the international sides don't go near the lesser comps like the NPC or the Currie Cup. You don't see them ever in it pretty much. So they haven't got the mileage up during the season that Northern Hemisphere sides do, especially the French obviously. But even in Pro 12, the way our season goes, it's a bit of this, bit of that. Pro 12, international rugby, back to Pro 12, Six Nations. It's coming at you all year, so by the time you get to June, don't know what end is up. Their season is not as long and not as arduous, not as many games. So,
which may be something.
That's one thing.
I'm not saying we have to be
going to try and beat them in.
I'm not saying we have to be Stepford fans and that everything's grand and keep smiling, nothing's happening, because there were problems on Sunday. There have been problems in the structure of European rugby for a while, but I'm just saying that not everything is bleak and that. There shouldn't be a complete overreaction, which there has been in some cases. Yeah. I mean, there's been huge overreactions.
We have to put it in perspective. If you were to say at the start of the tournament, name your starting 15 for the Ireland-France or Ireland-Argentina match, and there's a good chance that the 5 lads who were injured and couldn't play, 4 guys that were injured, and the one that was suspended, would have been in your starting 15. So if you're taking a third of your starting 15 out of the equation, there's a good chance then that team is going to be significantly weaker than the one that went out.
It was actually a perfect storm if you want to look at it that way. It was, as you mentioned, the 5 players were out and they happened to carry an awful lot of leadership. We were left with like Hayslip and Rory Best, really, possibly Rob Kearney. There's nobody else in there who's going to be shouting or telling people where to go or what to do, or you've also got the mental side of it. The way that it had been built up towards that France game for probably 3 years by supporters, and I'm sure by Joe Schmidt and by everybody in the Ireland camp. It was like as if it was so focused in on that game that you've got to win that game and then you'll avoid New Zealand. You know, they won the game. They avoided New Zealand, but they nearly
What
died
could
trying.
happening? And the other thing is,
and then how are you going to get back up to that pitch again next week? It's very hard to do a second time to get up to that absolute, especially when you've lost A, your leaders, and B, guys that would have been,
But,
you know.
yeah.
well, the other side of it is, I mean, to play the way Ireland play, and especially to take on that Argentinian team, to shut them down, we needed what in the military they call the heavy foot, and it wasn't there. O'Connell wasn't there, O'Brien wasn't there, Peter O'Mahony wasn't there, Johnny Sexton wasn't there, Tommy Bowe went off. So those are significant players in the style of rugby that Ireland play, the heavy carriers in traffic, and Johnny Sexton then kicking the ball.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so what we were left with a team that was set up actually to play one style of game, but not actually playing that game.
We were a knife at a gunfight.
Yeah, we were a team that was ready to. The selection that was out there with Henderson in the row and lots of Jordy Murphy in the back row, Ian Madigan, Keith Earls, eventually Luke Fitzgerald. That was a team that was able to play fast and loose rugby, but that's not how Ireland play. Ireland don't play fast and loose rugby. Ireland play very structured, pattern based rugby.
But that was our problem, Dave.
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah, yeah.
Like our problem was that what we were trying to play a style of rugby that we've been playing under Smith for two seasons.
Without the players that made it successful.
That's very true, but also how we tried to do it was appalling. Like we just stuck to plan A, and we tried to chuck the ball up through the middle. It didn't work. We got one break through the line when Luke Fitzgerald got through in the second half. But we continued to do it. We made acres of yards when we went wide, and we went wide 3 times. You know, we just didn't adapt to what was in front of us. We seemed to play by rote, colour by numbers. And when they made a cul-de-sac, they didn't know what to do, which is an indictment really on the players that they couldn't adapt.
Yeah, it is. But you know, Joe Schmidt has designed that game round the side he had, and we've said it a load of times about the lack of caps in the centre. He picked his 2 horses for the centre. They never played together once, I don't think, in the whole championship. Payne and Henshaw. When Payne was there, Henshaw was out. When
I think we should also add
out.
Payne into the important misses, because I mean we had a lot of defensive problems, and the outside centre is the captain of your defence, and he wasn't there.
Yeah, Keith Earls, you know, an easy target, but you know, I wouldn't be throwing it all on his back.
You can't throw any of it on his back. I mean, Keith Earls is was played out of position. The first thing that happened when Tommy Bowe came off was that Keith Earls should have trotted out to the wing, and Luke Fitzgerald came in at centre. That's what should have happened.
Well,
in my mind.
Yeah, but you
end up any better at centre.
But you end up playing where you're.
Yes, he is. You do. But I think that the Irish team wasn't. I mean, sometimes people say a team's not proactive and it's reactive. The Irish team wasn't even reactive. You know, it didn't react to the situation it found itself in on a number of things. I mean, our defence didn't change from the entire game, right? But every time, Argentina were able to get round the outside every single time.
They had 2 players out in the tram lines the whole match. You know, because once they had the ball, I think what they were doing was they had a pattern that once they had the ball, they'd spread the guys right out there. They'd have enough guys on the inside to punch a couple of holes, but as soon as those guys were needed, they had an overlap, built-in overlap. They just had to get the ball out.
Darragh Faulkner asked us a question on Facebook. He says, Les Kiss's departure, is it a blessing in disguise? Which, you know, maybe 12 months ago might have been a heretical statement. He says Ireland's sorry, I want to read this out because it's actually a very good point. Ireland's reverse drift technique was a flawed system waiting to be exploited. Warning signs were evident against Italy, yet nothing changed. Surely a Sean Edwards style blitz is the way to stop a team with such a heavy reliance on the wingers. Either way, giving Cordero and Imhoff 20 metres of space in the outside channels was a tactically naive move. Yeah. It's very hard to argue with any of that.
It is. Well, though Sean Edwards' blitz style,
yeah, I'm not about. Yeah, it's.
Is it hugely different from Les Kiss's style? You know,
they both concede room on the outside, but they do it in different ways.
Yeah, and they're both coming from rugby league. If you look, there's quite a lot of, you know, the amount of defence coaches. Look at Mike Ford, I know he's a head coach now. In Bath, there's this huge proliferation.
Nearly all are.
Yeah, nearly all are.
One thing I've noticed.
That's the Northern Hemisphere game. That's the way we're. It's partially down to the weather. It's, you know, because you're going to win an arm wrestle with that kind of stuff. If you
just take 2 matches in the World Cup, you take Japan against South Africa and you take South Africa against Wales. Take those 2 games. In those matches, the attacking team were rewarded for going for it, right?
Yeah.
South Africa scored a try in the 75th minute with a fantastic offload from the back of a scrum. Japan had an opportunity to take an easy 3-pointer to tie a game. They didn't. They spurned a chance to draw with a team that won the World Cup twice, but they didn't. They went for it.
Well, the only team
Can you
to beat
honestly say, hand on your heart, that this Ireland team, or indeed any of the Six Nations team, would have done what South Africa and Japan did in those two games?
Pretty sure to say they wouldn't.
No,
most of the time.
I'm fairly certain that they would. And the only team really that from the Northern Hemisphere that I'd say would do it would be Wales.
And Japan.
Okay, I mean from the Six Nations. Nations.
I know.
One thing that is interesting about you mentioned three defensive coaches in Edwards, Les Kiss and Mike Ford, and
Just on Kiss, is it a good thing he's gone at this stage? Yes, because it's actually 2008. It's 2015 now.
Yeah, it's nearly 10 years. That's a long
That's
time
an
in
awful
place.
long time to listen to one
Don't
guy.
forget, we won the Six Nations
that
last
alone.
year and this year
On our
based
defence.
on our defence.
Yeah.
But let's face it, we won a competition that's pretty mediocre. I wouldn't say. It's
Yeah, but we don't have to win any other competition.
I know we don't, Dave,
That's the
but
problem.
when we go into the World Cup, our inadequacies are.
But isn't that the
quite
coach's
shown.
job?
Our conservatism.
It's the coach's job to fix that.
Our conservatism keeps us in the World Cup, and I'm also convinced that the New Zealand and Australia in particular, South Africa a bit of an exception, and possibly Argentina, they're all kind of frontier type countries, and they're all populated by people who want to give it a go. Generally, as because they're out in the outback or
It's the mind state.
or
It's
the-
a national
It's a
consciousness.
national thing.
Yeah.
Like, even though it might be, the people who live in Sydney or Auckland don't have to go out and tame the wilderness.
Would you not say that
If
if
you're-
you meet New Zealanders, they are quite conservative people?
I would also say that they're the type of people that if you've got a puncture, you want to come across a Kiwi rather than an Irish person. If you've got something breaks down, a Kiwi will fix it.
There are twice as many cowboys in Argentina than there are in the United States of America, the home of the cowboy. The thing, just to go back to you mentioned.
I don't want to labour the point, but I just think it's a mindset thing with Southern Hemisphere guys that they want to give it a go, rather than us who are conservative old world types.
You mentioned three rugby league defence coaches: Mike Ford, Les Kiss, and Sean Edwards. We've seen them all up close, both internationally and at club level in some cases. And the three of them have one thing in common, actually. When their systems fail, they fail spectacularly.
Yeah.
That has happened to all three of them. And all three, two countries involved, have taken huge tractions as a result of that. But the thing is, the systems don't fail all that often.
Mm-hmm.
But when they do come down.
Like the German Autobahn.
Yeah.
It doesn't have any crashes, but when it does,
It's a big
people
one.
die.
Yeah. And that's one thing that's not. No, Argentina played the right game to beat the Irish team playing the game it was playing. The Irish team played the wrong game to suit the personnel it had on the pitch.
Well, that was the next part of the perfect storm. Like, Argentina had us figured out.
Mm-hmm.
How do you beat Joe Schmidt's teams? Breakdown is the first thing. Any team that robbed the breakdown of Leinster over the years, they were good. Ospreys used to.
Yeah.
Remember we'd
Destroy
say they
us.
used to wheel out this playbook every time, where they'd lash us out of it. Wales did it to us at the. I know it wasn't a Joe Schmidt thing. Wales did it at the last
World Cup.
And then the other thing was the wide. We've been so narrow the whole time, and it was staring in the face that somebody who had the guts and the talent to go wide quite often was going to get around us.
But
And
like
they
we
did.
haven't played well in the competition. Like we
No.
won our two gimmies. We
Yeah.
struggled against Italy, which I said earlier.
Who did the same thing?
Who won 4 matches in 4 years in the Six Nations.
Yeah.
We beat France.
Who
What
turned out
value
to be
is that?
What
shite.
value is that?
Yeah.
It turned out to be beaten by 60 odd points by.
A record defeat for a French team. The thing with the game against Argentina is Argentina were committed to winning the breakdown, and because they were winning the breakdown, they could play a wide game because they were winning the breakdown, so they could go wide and still retain possession.
And they're winning all the collisions.
We were playing a narrow game. We weren't winning the breakdown, so we couldn't even play a narrow game and retain possession. So you had a complete dichotomy in approach.
Every time they ran at us, we seemed to be on our heels, walking backwards, absorbing the tackle.
Well, how many? We saw that a couple of times in Joe Schmidt's last year, if you recall. There was an awful lot of ground conceded in defence. Now, it didn't become fatal. Certainly not in the Pro 12, and ultimately not in Europe. But at the time, and in the Heineken Cup, it did become fatal. That we did soak a lot of tackles and we did concede a lot of ground. Sometimes it happens, but it shouldn't.
I think that's a lot to do, again, back to, we're going in a bit of a circle here, but back to the mindset thing. We didn't come out...
No, I don't think we were right for that match.
We didn't come out wanting to cripple them. We came out kind of unsure and all drifty and all, you know. Like the previous week, we started with Sexton, but we still had... We had Earls and Madigan for most of the game, either side of Henshaw. We didn't struggle with the defensive... Okay, the French weren't going wide, right? But we didn't struggle in the collision against probably a bigger team in the French, but we struggled this week, and that's defence is an attitude, isn't that what they say? That's where we were.
Well, as Dave said, when you're losing the amount of experience, and particularly after conceding, 14 or 17 points,
experience to have your mindset right.
But you need leaders. People. You need leaders to drive the line and to constantly remind fellas to get back up on their feet and to make the hits to cover the space. You need somebody shouting in your ear, and clearly that wasn't happening in that game because the amount of space that we left open, like they attacked us at will, and basically, if they were more clinical, they could have scored a couple more tries.
Well, you look at the guy who's the defensive leader in the selection that was out there. It was probably Robbie Henshaw. Mm-hmm. Now, Robbie Henshaw is a fantastic prospect and a very good player, but he's only there a wet week.
Probably there 12 caps.
Yeah, he's not experienced. He's just not, and that comes back to bite you in the ass ultimately or eventually. Look, it's easy to say certain players did certain things at certain times. It doesn't matter who they are. But what we had was, there's 32 guys, 31 players and the coach. That's who it comes down to. And there was just a complete and utter upfuck.
Yeah, well, a perfect storm. We got all the things. Joe Schmidt's normal tactical nous and his normal incredibly good selection and who to deploy at what point in the game. Substitution, something that Kidney was criticised a lot for bringing, and possibly Eddie O'Sullivan as well, bringing people on at the right time and a 23-man game. It's been a strength of Joe Schmidt in this game. It kind of let him down. Now,
McGrath came on and he was superb.
Yeah, and maybe he should have started. Because Cian Healy, while he didn't do anything wrong, hasn't looked like the force.
No, he hasn't looked like the man he
used to be. You wouldn't, and he did get I think it was him. I didn't see the thing back, but I think it was him that got minced in the first scrum where we got torn. It was our own scrum in front of our own post, and we got torn out of it. But the thing that I was harping on about for the last few weeks was for the French game was maybe playing Henderson at 6, and when we lost O'Connell, you could have got the 4-second. I think I said it last week. You could have got the 4-second rows involved. Started Ryan and had your man. To be honest, I don't think. Like people are saying, oh well, Murphy and Henry were a bit lightweight for that game. I think the opposite. I don't. If you had a selected, say Murphy on the bench, Henderson at 6, and maybe it would have been Mike McCarthy then covering the second row, I don't think we would have been any stronger, to be quite honest with you. I don't think there's anything he could have done in the 23 that would have made us.
I think we were too lightweight to play the game we were trying to play, because we were trying to play a game based on a heavy pack. If we were trying to play a faster, looser game, we weren't too up because we had nice mobility. Yeah. But that's not the game we were trying to play, because that's not the game Ireland play. Ireland play a very controlled. Phase to phase game.
Henderson at 6.
In retrospect, looking back on it, you can say looking back on things, perfect hindsight is perfect.
It's very easy to be a good coach.
Yeah, it's great. So I would have, in retrospect, looking back at the game, I would have tightened up the game even more. I would have played Donncha Ryan at out half or at at
Me too,
at lock. I would have played Henshaw. Not Henshaw. What the hell? Henderson at 6. I would have had Jackson at 10, and I would have told him to kick the skin off the ball. Do your best Rog impersonation there, and I wouldn't have. I would have strangled them.
But that was what was so frustrating. Like we went through phase after phase. We were clearly not going anywhere, and then we either got pinged or we kicked it into touch straight. You, as you say, you needed somebody to grab that game by the scruff of the neck and say, we are playing the ball down in their half or down in their 22, and we ain't coming out of there.
Well, doesn't that say it all about
we'll win this game in multiples of 3, as John often says. That's what Raj would have done. I mean, that's and sometimes that's the right thing.
But he's 120 caps, you know.
I don't think we could have won that game in multiples of 3 because they would have just kept scoring 5. But however,
they would. It's a lot harder to do it from their own 22 when they're facing line out maul, because that's the way. If you've got a team that's nice and loose and wants to run the ball, you don't want to play that way. You want to do the opposite. You want to keep it tight. You want the ball to have a vitamin D deficiency at the end of the match. It's as simple as that.
But they're well able for the rough stuff as well. Like
are they though? I
I
don't think this Argentinian team is. This Argentinian team is more. People talk about the tradition of Argentinian rugby, and I think I said this before. The tradition of Argentinian rugby that everybody knows actually started in 1973, when they realised Hugo Porta was really, really good at kicking the ball. How do we give him opportunities kicking the ball? We scrummage. And that's the Argentina that we all know. That's when that was born. But before that, Argentina, influenced by...
They'd only been playing about 8 years or something like that.
No. Argentina have a very long history.
But you think about it, and you think of...
Who's
the most famous...
the second biggest English-speaking city in the world at the turn of the 19th century. So, rugby was
Who's
very
the most
strong
famous rugby player from Argentina in Leinster? Contepomi, right?
Yeah.
Look at the way he played.
Yeah.
He played with, I'm going to run the ball from behind my own posts and do unexpected things.
Look at his partner at halfback. Another
exactly.
one.
You know, and that was a tradition of Argentinian rugby.
Hugo Porta skewed people's perceptions of Argentina. Now, he was a brilliant player, one of the greatest out halves of all time. But
probably has the drop goal record.
He did skew people's perceptions of Argentinian rugby. Argentinian rugby was always a wide game until 1973-ish.
Anyway, I've had enough of the Irish game for a moment.
Well, can we talk about the list again?
Well, we're going to go and talk about the other quarterfinals first. So, South Africa are through to the semi-final. They beat Wales. As I mentioned earlier, they scored a fantastic try in the last couple of minutes to clinch.
Wonderful piece of fantastic football. Just
lovely,
beautiful. It was a lovely thing. Yeah.
But Wales, you'd have to say, are probably like they beat us twice this year. Once in the Six Nations. You'd have to say they're certainly, if they're not ahead of us, they're up there. It's the two of us that are probably the two best Northern Hemisphere teams.
And Wales again.
Best of the shit bunch.
But like they were
they had their injury problems as well.
But they were shanked with their injuries.
They were in a really hard group.
But what they did was they actually dealt with it. Like we had injuries and we really didn't.
Well, no. In fairness, 7 days ago we were here saying how well Joe Schmidt had done to expand the squad after the injuries we had and the thing. So we can't.
Well, look what happened though.
But Wales definitely did do well. But the thing is, Wales. The reason why Wales had so many injuries is because of the state of the game in Wales. Their players. When Gatland gets the Welsh players, he looks at them and they're just not fit enough. So he has to hothouse them, and that causes problems.
Yeah, it's the way they play. It's very attritional. Like Sean Edwards' defence thing is very attritional, and so is our game plan, as we've seen, quite attritional. So it depended on winning the battle at of the collisions, and all rugby is. But the way we play, the narrow kind of style, is very dependent on a lot of hits. Which, if you're looking for space rather than collisions as the Kiwis do, you're not going to be taking hits quite as frequently, so you're probably going to get less injuries. It's like you say, Jason. It's we're coming off second best, but like to get back to Wales, I think if we had their group and we had the amount of injuries they had, we wouldn't have come out of it. It would have been England and Australia I just think they handled it very well. I was sure they were going to be, England and Australia were going to come out of that group. When they didn't, I was amazed. And they weren't that far off against Australia either. Australia were really psyched up for that game. And they had the same thing we had. They kind of fell flat in the quarter and they were nearly rumbled, but in fact they should have been rumbled by Scotland.
We'll come to that one.
We'll get on to that one. But, Wales, Ireland, who's the top of the Northern Hemisphere? I don't know, but I know that New Zealand and Australia are the Shut up. Ian. Yes, Japan were the only team from the Northern Hemisphere that beat one of the rugby championship nations, which is pretty scary for the rest of us. So yeah, and they're in the Pacific Nations Cup with like the USA, Canada.
Didn't look all that impressive in it either this year.
and
I
Pacific
watched the Pacific Nations Cup this year because I just did. And Japan weren't great in it for whatever reason. Maybe now there wasn't a lot of release of players from their league, but Fiji went through that tournament and demolished everyone. Look what happened to Fiji.
They
were in the shit group.
I know, yeah, but they didn't. Fiji didn't even look all that impressive. Apart from the first game against England, did they look overly impressive, Fiji? I don't think so.
You wonder if they just threw the hat at us when they were beating the match against England.
Possibly.
I don't know. Obviously, New Zealand hammered France. San Andre's gone, and
New Zealand
that game, and it was an exhibition match.
New Zealand were wonderful. They were wonderful.
They were beautiful.
Yeah, it was a thing of beauty.
It wasn't a contest, but it was some incredible. Like, here's the difference, right? A guy who I had never heard of, I haven't watched much Super Rugby in the last couple of seasons. Their loose head prop replaced the guy who came out to replace Tony Woodcock when he was injured. Flew into the squad, hadn't been with the squad, flew in and came on at whatever time he came on in the match, I can't remember, but he came up with an absolutely beautiful offload out of the back of his head. It's a prop! Like, that is just shows you exactly what New Zealand are at. They're playing from 1 to 15. Their backs, their Sonny Bill, Williams, and all these guys can ruck. So we've said this loads of times before about the modern game is the forwards can handle and the backs can ruck. Those guys can really handle.
Take a look at Ma Nonu. The Ma Nonu playing in the World Cup is not the Ma Nonu we've known for the last couple of years. Remember, the Ma Nonu for the last couple of years was a sledgehammer. This guy's a blade. He's lost weight. He's toned up. He looks incredible, and he's regained all his old pace. He just looks.
They look about 10 kilos lighter.
Yeah, they do. They look lighter than everyone. They look like
but they're well conditioned.
Like a small All Blacks team. I mean, there's not such a thing as, but they do look it.
They're well conditioned, and they don't have to play in mud fests in December in Ireland or England. So that's the way. I mean, I think rugby should really go that way, just for everybody's sake, because maybe doing something.
It rains
like
in New Zealand too, John. It doesn't rain in Australia. Definitely.
It does rain in the South Island, especially, but we're back to this thing about the tackle as well. If ways to change the game to make people more, make the game a bit more expansive. I think that if you had to tackle around the waist, say between the knee and the waist or whatever, to stop this going in high, trying to kill the offload, and there will be more offload. There's a couple of benefits. One, less concussions. Two, so much more offloads. So 3, teams wouldn't be able to rely on sheer physicality to win the game all the time. They'd just have, because people would be getting their hands free, because all you've got to do is lift your hands up if you've been tackled around the waist, and you're going to get the ball away. It would change the structure
It's
of the
very
game.
difficult to implement.
It's difficult to implement, but it would change the structure of the game overnight.
They have problems implementing the current high tackle rule as it is.
That's true. Yeah.
Like you saw Dev Toner, he probably put his arm out at 3 foot off the ground. No, seriously. But the guy ducked down. Your man was only 3 foot off the ground when he ducked down, and Toner was pinged for a high tackle, which doesn't make sense really. Like high tackle is supposed to be if someone is.
I agree with you. I mean, but the thing in a game where you've got guys who are 6'10" and who are 5'5", occasionally you're going to get situations like that. You just have to. You could see Dev kind of when he conceded that there's no point now. He just moved on. There's nothing you can do about it.
Anyway, look, moving towards probably the game of the weekend was the Australia South Africa Scotland match. It was just a fantastic display by Scotland, really totally unexpected.
And again, Australia didn't get to the pitch of the game, and every time they scored, they thought, "That's it, we can ease off now." And
they scored 5 tries,
Scotland didn't, but they kept coming back.
It was.
Greg Laidlaw, who I think is a shite player, he's a good kicker, but I really do think he's a shite player. He had a brilliant game, he really did.
Scotland played really, 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 really well. Did they deserve to win? On a video, if you look at the game on video, then obviously yes. I mean, we have to discuss what is now officially known as the incident. Could you have given that the other way as a referee? What would you think? I mean, I looked at it a couple of times, and I tried to think where the referee was and what he saw. It's hard to know.
It was a ballsy call to make in the last. He could easily have ignored it and just said.
And there's nothing in it for him to give that call.
But he'd given one earlier that he'd given as a knock-on, which he could have given as an offside.
He also
gave it as accidental.
He also
offside,
binned the Scottish guy for a deliberate knockdown, which he wasn't.
Well, I would have done that as well, because my opinion is unless they knock the ball up, it's a knock-on, and if it's as simple as that.
He went for the ball though. You have to.
Of course, he went for the ball. That's why it's a knock-on.
No, but there's a difference in slapping it down and going for the ball.
Well, there's the guide used to be, if the player's hand is moving up, then it's not deliberate. If the player's hand is moving down, then it is deliberate. However, I think they've removed the second part, and unless the player's hand is moving up, then it's deliberate. I think that's the guideline that referees have nowadays, because every single one of those I've seen given that way. I think it was quite close to his. It was a harsh call, but it was a call that I've seen given 100 times in 100 matches. I've seen the opposite. And I've seen in another 100 matches, I've seen the opposite given.
Wasn't it surprising though that World Rugby came out and basically threw Joe Barra under the bus?
Yeah, I think it's going to come back and bite them on the ass. I think that's a big mistake.
Yeah, well, it is harder to get refs if you're going to demonise them. You have to kind of shield them a bit. Or
coaches make mistakes. Players made hundreds of mistakes in that game. It was lashing rain. It was under a lot of pressure. There was 80,000 people watching him. He made a mistake, but I think they should be back.
How would people react if Philip Brown came out and released a statement in the morning saying, "Look, he didn't mean to, but Ian Madigan missed the kick at 23-20." That would be a ridiculous thing to happen. And it's equally ridiculous to suggest that a referee who made an honest mistake, if it was a mistake, but an honest mistake, should be demonised by the world organising body.
They should at least have come out and said, well, he made a mistake, he must have been unsighted, or should have given him some.
But at the end of the day, the referee's decision, and what makes rugby,
you move on,
or like every other sport, the referee's decision is final. Yeah. Some are right, hopefully most are right, but some are wrong, and that's the way it goes.
It wasn't easy. Sometimes you get things like the Peter Allen thing, the into touch, that was just ridiculously wrong, and you get a bit grumpy about those ones. Yeah, but something like what happened to Scotland, it was an honest mistake rather than an egregious error.
It was a call. He got it wrong.
Yeah,
just move on.
Yeah.
Anyway, but the thing is, there was, as you said.
So I just want to say, I mean, we did lose, right? We lost, and South Africa, but wasn't it another great weekend of rugby?
Yeah,
wasn't it? Was. I mean, despite how bad we felt, yeah. I mean, I was, very depressed after the game, but that Australia Scotland game, managed to take the edge off.
Yeah.
It's just because it was such a brilliant game.
Yeah.
Well, there's been a lot of talk about the sort of the gulf that's appearing between the championship teams and the Six Nations. There's been 7 matches so far between those two competitions. Now it's 7-0.
Yeah.
I think there was 246 points scored for championship teams versus 221, so twice as many points. 121, sorry. And it's the first time in the 7 World Cups that there hasn't been a team from the Six Nations or 5 Nations in a semi-final.
Yeah, it's depressing, but lessons have to be learned, of course. But people are going. You said it at the beginning. People are going around with their hair on fire, thinking we need to just sack everybody and
sack everyone, jettison the lines, fire everyone.
Get 200. Yeah, jettison the lines is another one. Get 31 new players.
I read that. I just started laughing.
But with just a little change of emphasis on things like the skills side of it, rather than the fucking going for size, bosh. If the French are doing that, Let the French fucking do it.
Well,
Let's find a way.
there's a question on Facebook that kind of ties into that. Dan Finley asks, do Ireland pick functional players who fit a low-risk system? I think low-risk system is the key phrase there. Instead of picking flair players, for want of a better phrase, who play off the cuff and are therefore not seen to complement the systems. For example, Zebo, Gilroy, and to a lesser extent, Luke Fitzgerald. Dan goes on to say, it's not an indictment of Joe, just a question about the style and empowering players, which I think is a very good phrase to use, to be confident in the skills shown by many Southern Hemisphere players.
I agree.
That's an excellent point. But what I will say about Joe Schmidt is he had 2 years to get this World Cup. Like, he was under pressure from the minute he came in for the World Cup. So he had to make decisions early on. Like the thing about the two centres that he wanted to get playing together as much as possible. And like the game plan that was not very adventurous. Like, if he had the amount of time that he had with Leinster to get all the skills up to scratch, to get all the handling and passing and all that shit.
Do you think, I'm going to be
Then
sacrilegious
maybe it
now, so,
wouldn't
and
be
remember,
different.
blasphemy is a crime in Ireland, so, just be careful, you might have to be called in court to testify to this. Do you think Joe erred in giving Brian O'Driscoll that last season?
No, but
You look how he played against Italy.
Mm-hmm.
He was fantastic that day in his last cap in Dublin.
yeah.
Like, he made about 4 offloads. I can't remember if he scored, but he certainly made about 3 tries out of some of the offloads that he did in that game. He was at the time we went on. We won the Six Nations. Like, financially for the IRFU, the Six Nations is the cash cow.
Yeah.
You can't just keep saying, "Oh well, we're building for the World Cup in 2 years or 4 years down the road."
Absolutely.
You have to play the here and now. There's some guys who are going to be capped, and they'll win their first cap and they'll win their last cap in the space of the 2 World Cups. They won't ever play in a World Cup. The attritional rate of a professional rugby player. I mean, look at we all know players will go through and get injured. Definitely, I would say you pick your best 15.
Now, as it happens,
Did
I agree.
Conrad Smith get jettisoned by Steve
I agree with the
same
point.
age?
I agree with your point. So I actually agree that he was right. That I wouldn't. But the point has been made about the centre. Not so much about Bob, but about the centre partnership not having enough time to bed in more than anything else.
Yeah, well, Jared Payne wouldn't have been qualified.
No, well, you wouldn't
There
have
you
been.
go.
Well, that's the other side of it, But I mean, it is a valid point. I mean, it just ties back into what you were saying about the amount of time that Joe, or was it you who were saying, but the amount of time that Joe Schmidt had available to him. I mean, he had 2 years. He really didn't have 2 years because certain players that he was going to be, that were going to be really important for this campaign, that were brought over for the specific purpose of this campaign, weren't going to be ready for.
He's had the players for 3 months, would you say, between Carton House and over in England. If you think of the 5 matches that we played in the World Cup, who would you say would be the best 3 players that played in it? Who was the ones that caught your eye?
From Ireland? I would say, it's hard to pick them actually, isn't it?
Well, just going back on my point, I would pick Zebo. I thought I would be a critic of him. Sometimes don't like his attitude, but I have to say, now admittedly, I hate that expression as well, but you have to say, now admittedly against weaker teams, you have to say that he was the one who there was a bit of spark about him, who was initiating.
I think that word too.
Okay, was initiating. He initiated attacks, and he took risks.
Yeah.
And I don't think now maybe he doesn't fit into
Risks
the lad
taking conditions,
that
that's the thing.
who wrote the question,
Dan Finley.
Dan. But maybe Schmidt wants someone, and maybe Zebo is a square peg going into a round hole. I don't know.
The problem
I think
often
he
with
is,
Zebo is that he's in a fat peg trying to fit into a round hole. I mean, that's the here and now, but he wasn't in. I mean, he was only in shape to play international rugby for the last 12 months. He wasn't before that. But yes, you say 3 players, and one of those players is Simon Zebo. Who excited you during the World Cup? Simon Zebo, Ian Henderson, and Jack McGrath.
Yeah.
They were the 3 players. Did anyone actually even play above their standard?
And you know what?
Except for those 3? I don't think so.
Not one of those started against France.
No.
Madigan came into his own against France. I know you could criticise him a little bit.
He did. He played very well against France. Unfortunately, he didn't back it up against Argentina.
None of them did that. None of them.
I mean, you look at it, guys. Some guys were good. I mean, Murray's always good. He's reliable.
His box kicking hasn't been as good as it was.
He had, but
Nations
then, like everyone else, he had a bit of a fecking offer against Argentina.
I remember watching the match, and I think we won one contestable ball in the air. Like that tactic just didn't work. Other times, whether Bo comes up for one or Rob Kearney plucks one from the air, we didn't win any ball. Like they seemed to win every 50-50 ball that was launched up.
I mean, those are things that you would regard as bread and butter of the Irish rugby player. But you know, the Argentinian game is one that you have to look at, learn from, and then forget. Because ultimately,
too painful to watch.
No, because you don't learn, you don't progress based on reacting to one outlier to a certain extent.
If you remember,
what you do is you learn, you progress from reacting looking at the entire campaign.
But Dave, if you
on.
look back to say November 13 when we were beaten by the All Blacks in the last minute, I think Schmidt went through that with a fine-tooth comb, and he highlighted the number of errors that I can't remember. There was 12 errors or something in the last period of play where they scored their try. And I'm sure he can probably pick out 112 errors in that game. Yep. But you do need to go and analyse that game and see where we went wrong and pick through it and try and rectify it, because if we don't, we're just putting our head into the sand.
No, what I'm saying is you don't do it in isolation. You do it as part of the whole process. If you just base your entire review on the Argentina game, for example, if you do that, Simon Zebo doesn't come out of the World Cup looking good at all because he didn't play in the Argentina game. So you have to base it on the entire campaign and not just the one match. But you made an interesting point, actually. I think you have it in your notes that we missed 13 tackles in the match.
On average per match.
Our average per match. Jesus, it's even worse. Eddie O'Sullivan used to always say, if you've missed 11 tackles in a game, you've lost the game.
Anything in double figures, I reckon you're probably going to lose.
No, well, Eddie O'Sullivan's magic number was 11.
Well, he was possibly right. We were with and without the ball, we were losing collisions. We were just that's mental. Has to be mental. We couldn't make ground because
mental.
We couldn't. It's mental, man. It's right in your rental. But when we had the ball, we couldn't get through them because we didn't have the whatever it was, mental attitude, physical program, whatever you want to call it. And the same when they had the ball, we couldn't bloody stop them. Oh, we were panicking, we were drifting, and then there was a big gap out on the outside.
Plus, it's been 15 years since the last Saint-Germain album.
Yeah, good point.
Anyway, John, you are a roving reporter. You were down on the ground in Clonethley.
Literally.
Several times.
One too many listeners.
24-14. We came back, showed a bit of spirit towards the end, but just not quite enough.
No, if we'd have started that spirit a little bit earlier, we might have done something with them. They really relaxed up. You have to say that, they were looking like job done, 3 tries, Asher will relax and we'll bang the 4th one in when they're not looking. It never happened. We came back at them. The last 15 minutes, really, I think. Again, I haven't seen the game back, but I think it was the last 15 minutes that we managed to get a few tries in, which is good for the young lads. I thought Ringrose looked really good on the wing. Why you didn't bring him in?
I can't understand why he wasn't played at centre. I really can't.
Position, get the guy. Theo's injured. Get the guy in there. Okay, it might have been a bit tough. I
felt bad for Ross Byrne. He had
a bit of a shot.
He had a bit of a Rodney Parade under Cheika, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
He had a really, really bad one. I mean,
and the halfbacks when they changed, both of them, Boss kind of mixed the good with the bad. Was a fair bit of bad.
He was good without the ball. That's probably the best way of describing it. But he was, in fairness, he was good without the ball. I mean, he protected Byrne a lot. Byrne was getting, for whatever reason, he got ran over twice in the first 10 minutes and really retreated into a shell, which is really unfortunate because he's a guy I actually really, really think is going to go all the way, Ross Byrne, but he didn't look like it on Friday.
He's not as ready Friday. As Marsh is.
No,
Marsh
has impressed.
Yet again, he's impressed me again. 2 seasons there. I wouldn't say thereabouts, but he has been
knocking around the place.
He has been within
the A team.
He's playing for the A team. He probably got a few caps with the firsts, whereas Byrne is more of a novice coming into the setup.
Oh, absolutely. But you could see that when
look, I'm not going to be. We can't be critical of Byrne because I mean, we know he's a talented player. We saw him play for the under-20s. We saw him play for Leinster A. He's got the whole lot. It's just a matter of learning how to put it onto the pitch. Cathal Marsh has got those extra 2 years maybe of experience from being around the senior squad. I wasn't sure. I said it a couple of weeks ago that I wasn't sure if he imposed his personality on games enough as out half. I changed against Cardiff. I thought he really did. I really thought he imposed himself. And then when he came on as substitute against Clenetti, you know, we could have turned the game around. We could have got a losing bonus point, and if we did, it would have been because of the direction he gave us.
The sad thing, I suppose, to some degree, is now that he's third choice 10 all of a sudden with the other two lads coming back from the World Cup.
Is he?
Will he get much more?
Not going to play 12.
Madigan play 12, I'd suggest.
Well, we'll have to see where Madigan plays. Matt O'Connor liked him at 12. You know, we'll have to see, does Leo Cullen and Gervin Dempsey, like him at 12? I don't know. I like, he was just coming into his own at 10, and you know, being behind Sexton, like the kind of matches he's gonna get are the ones in the middle of the Six Nations where he's been the sub, and you know, he gets the free weeks to come and play, and that's, you know, Sexton is probably going to get a fair bit of rest, so you can see Madigan getting a bit more time at 10 than you would normally expect.
Begs the question of when they will come back into the Leinster
I'd
team.
suggest we'll see them the week before they'll be back in for the game in the Aviva against Munster. The old traditional return. I think it'll be back.
One.
Well, whatever way it is, it'll be the week before we don't. It's later on this year.
I think it's the Scarlets in the RDS.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So
I think it'll be a similar pattern to how when they normally come back. To be honest with you.
Well, if we had won this game, we would have had 2 more weeks.
Yeah.
You know, even win, lose or draw.
Yeah. The one thing is that they do have that no matter when they come back, unless they come back next week, they do have Ireland's loss is Leinster's gain and Munster's gain and Ulster's gain.
Very, very something that you really would a game that you really, really don't want. It's like, you know, you lost $4,000 and you found 3 pence. You know?
That's true.
Well, we've lost 2, won 2. We're 7 points off the lead and 7th position in the table.
We've 19 players to come back though.
We do. And
seriously.
We play Glasgow, which probably lost, the other club that lost the most of the.
Wonder how many they'll have back.
I don't know. I'm sure they're going to give them a
More
week
than
off.
us.
Their big signing for next season is already joined up after a certain amount of confusion that he wouldn't. No, I was waiting for Jason to say his name. The Fijian winger there was an awful lot of questioning whether he'd show up at all, but he did, and
I think he had to.
Yeah, I think he kind of had to.
Shamed into
Yeah.
it.
Well, DTH was back for the Scarlets in his,
Sorry,
making his debut.
that's World Cup star DTH van der Merwe.
Exactly, yeah. Well, he scored another couple, didn't he? At the
He
weekend?
did, yeah.
He did.
And Regan King looks as good as ever.
Yeah,
Your
he's a
favourite
great
player.
He's just a class act. He's the kind of guy you could, you know, you take videos of him. He's a bit like him or Will Greenwood or whatever. And you just show it to kids and go, that's how you play centre.
We could have done with a bit more of him.
So it was kind of it was a mixed bag for the Irish teams. Connacht won, Munster stayed at the table unbeaten, and Ulster were beaten by Edinburgh. Of course, we lost.
I didn't see that game.
I saw none of those games.
Did you?
Nope.
Um,
And I'm not ashamed to say it.
well, I didn't see them because I was away travelling, so I have an excuse.
Well, Scarlets play Munster next weekend, which would be obviously someone's going to lose their 100% record.
Yeah, that's good to see. We always like to see
Someone's cherry is going to get popped.
somebody's cherry popped. The cherry popping Scarlets or the cherry popping Munsters. But our team in red is going to lose.
Fair
Even if
enough.
they're not wearing red.
And the other Irish interest is the Ospreys play Connacht and Ulster play Cardiff. So
And are they home or away?
Ospreys are at home against Connacht and Ulster are at home to Cardiff.
Well, Ospreys and Ulster are going to win then, you would imagine.
Even though Connacht do have World Cup star. What's he insists, is it AJ or Adge he wants to be called?
Yeah, Adge,
Adge McGinty.
Oh yeah.
Now, there's notions for you.
His father is the headmaster in Blackrock.
There was a fella played midfield for Cavan in the late 70s and early 80s called Adge King. No relation to Stephen King.
There you go. Good stuff. No relation to Adge McGinty either, no? Well, you know, we're also going to have 2 other impressive games of rugby next weekend. We're going to have South Africa and New Zealand, and in the replay of the Four Nations Championship, Quad Nations Championship, we're going to have a very interesting one for me is going to be Australia and Argentina. See who's got enough left in the tank after their Australia.
I wonder will Australia try and play with the two back rows and try and play that loose open style against Argentina. I'd say they might bring in some heavy foot for that one.
I wonder how that's going to get on. Yeah, it's a very interesting game. Much more interesting than New Zealand, who are probably going to thrash South Africa. Having said that,
South Africa and New Zealand
Well,
is
you
one
see
of those
Unbelievable.
games.
South Africa are probably the only team in the world that think they're better than New Zealand.
No, they don't think they're better than New Zealand. They know they're better than New Zealand. It's just that sometimes they don't win. I'm serious. I mean, you've been in South Africa. I've been in South Africa. Have you been in South Africa? You know what South Africans are like when it comes to looking down on Kiwis.
Yeah.
You know,
well,
even the white ones.
It's a funny thing. It's a funny thing that South Africa are kind of the exception to the rule of the Southern Hemisphere.
Yeah.
If you go back to my analogy about them being,
Frontiers people.
Frontiers people. Maybe they've been there a bit longer than the rest. They've been 400 years. Those Boers have been in.
They get someone else to change their tyre for them.
That's exactly it. But they are. Do you know what it is with them though? They're just arrogant. I mean, don't mean that in a bad way necessarily, but
Is there a good way?
they like to think that
They're very arrogant about their rugby.
they can beat you up. They don't care who you are, and if they can't beat you up, then they can beat you up.
Do you remember when
that's what they do.
O'Gara
They-
scored that quick tap and go penalty?
Yeah.
I think it was 04, and their coach before that match said, "Nah, no one would get into it. We might put O'Driscoll on the bench."
But that's
there you go.
that is the
That's
Springbok
arrogance.
mindset. And I mean, there are many flaws in the South African character, but they're generally nice people. I mean, they actually are generally nice people.
Can't beat you with that physicality.
But when
they
it
beat you with that
when it comes to
physicality.
rugby, they're extraordinarily arrogant. But then they have reason to be.
Sure do.
There have been times when New Zealand teams have got their arses spanked by the Springboks.
Well, they famously never won a series in South Africa
Yeah.
until 1996. Like that's quite a lot of history in between. I know they didn't get away on tours very much in the old days, but it's still a long time, so they're the only.
Well, they've won 2 of the 5 World Cups that they've played.
Yeah, I mean it's quite a record. What was it? Louis Lloyd said at the Louis Lloyd was the president of the South African Rugby Union at the end of the first World Cup. At the dinner, he said, "Well, South Africa have won the first real World Cup."
There's arrogance.
Yeah.
So well, we'll see how they get on with that arrogance. I don't think it's going to get them too far against New Zealand. To be honest, they look to be.
No.
the
There's
form
only
of
so far
the
belief
world.
can take in. That New Zealand team is the team from heaven.
We were all wondering.
But that New Zealand team were beaten by Australia in Sydney, right?
When it counted. Well, we were
Yeah,
all
true.
wondering, were they just that little bit over the hill? I think I said it last
No.
week.
But
Obviously
don't
they're not.
forget that they were playing a team that had decided to sack its coach and coach itself.
And then didn't.
And then at some point, perhaps they just had been
Too much
wonderfully
hard work.
French. Nah, we're not interested. Walk away and just turn their back on it. Like,
Oh, there's even more great stuff going on in French rugby at the moment. Pierre Camus, who's the president of French Rugby Union and kind of head of the traditionalists, has decided to run for a 3rd term, despite saying he won't. He's up against Bernard Laporte, who's the, if you like, heading the Reformist Party. If Laporte gets the job, Novez loses his.
really?
Really? Ouch. That would be an interesting
That
one
is
to
the
watch.
word on the street in France, that if Laporte wins the presidency, bye-bye Guy.
No more gay for you.
So, French rugby, I'll tell you, you can make a soap opera and sell it to Netflix.
But then it just gives more power to the clubs. Then, you know what I mean?
But the other side of
course.
that is that Laporte... But is Laporte the club's man, or is
Laporte.
Laporte just Laporte?
Yeah, he's out for the main chance.
So he was a minister, wasn't he? at one
He was a
stage?
government. He was minister for sport.
Like, you know, that, he's obviously got some clout behind him.
Yeah. But Austra-
People have made the suggestion that he might be in Bougelal's pocket. It's not really true. It's more likely that Bougelal unwittingly is in Laporte's pocket, because Laporte is the guy who walks into the revolving door behind you and comes out in front of you. That's the guy he is.
Well, there's a lot of pockets in France, and a lot of them are a lot deeper than Bougelal, so I wouldn't be too worried about that. However, on the other semi-final, Australia and Argentina, I think is going to be an intriguing game. Argentina nearly beat them over in Perth, I think it was 2 years ago. it was a lashing wet day and they beat the crap out of them, but they just came up a point short, I think. They've beaten South Africa in South Africa. I said it before the game last week, their handling is superb. The South African, or the Argentinian back division, and even the forwards, have just such nonchalant kind of, they can throw that ball around as good with the best of them.
Anyone notice when the wheels fell off the Australian wagon? And it happened almost like throwing a switch the moment it started raining.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's
Matt-
once I saw
Matt-
that. Right?
Matt Williams
played a very good.
yeah, I know.
And like he kind of said that there was just those kids that are playing rugby in Australia, because there's been a drought for the last 10 years.
They have no idea how to play in the rain, and you can notice. I wonder, because we're getting closer. I mean, the weather has been fantastic for the tournament.
It's starting to
It has done
turn
them a
now,
favour,
though.
Yeah,
hasn't
but
it?
we're getting towards the business end of European rainy season.
I think
you know.
Argentina might be better in the wet.
I think they will be. Yeah,
So if it's lashing rain and there's no roofs and
any more than stadium? No.
So if it rains, I'd like to see. Or I think you could see the grunt of the Argies get up there. We shall see.
Yeah, I was just thinking about, because it just came to me about going back to Leinster actually, and we were talking about Carl Marsh and how guys fit in, and Dara Falkland asked a question about Leinster. Is there a case for starting some of our young, talented form players in the big European matches this year? The likes of Van der Fleer, Luke McGrath, Marsh and Ringrose look capable of making the step up.
Absolutely.
I think
you
some of
don't
them
play
are.
them all
No.
in the one game, but absolutely you play guys like Van der Fleer.
Yeah.
He's ready now, as far as I'm concerned. Ringrose,
They're not going to play him in place of 3 guys that have gone to the World Cup.
they're going to be playing.
No, I wouldn't start any of them. But what I do is I'd use them in matches, and I'd certainly.
No, I agree.
I wouldn't even. I'd use them even as regular replacements. I wouldn't just give them garbage time. I'd use them in the course of a match. I'd use Luke McGrath, because I think Luke McGrath should be our second choice scrum half now anyway.
Yeah.
Again,
these
Boss
days.
was surprisingly was called up to the national team.
The whole tackle bikes.
Okay, fine, but like, why wasn't Marmy?
I mean, if
brought
it
over
was just well, you see, that's
He's
the
a
thing.
lot of
If it was
experience
just
with
to hold
tackle
tackle bags, why not call Marmion or Nick McCarthy or Luke McGrath? It wasn't just. I mean, it wasn't just to hold tackle bags. Joe called him up because he thinks he might be an option to put him on the pitch. That's why he calls up anyone. But I'd use Luke McGrath as our second choice scrum half in all the games, not just some of them. I would make him our second choice scrum half. Van der Fleer I would use as a guy to give a couple of innings relief, as they say in baseball. Go Mets. To Sean O'Brien at the end of games. Ringrose, what's the story? What do we do with Ringrose? How do we solve a problem like Gary?
Well, if they're not going to bring him in from the wing into 13 when they have an ideal opportunity to do so,
I would have loved to see
Are they
him
gonna play in the European
playing
game?
outside Ben Teo.
But you see, perhaps
we all would.
perhaps he was training in on the wing for the entire week, and maybe
Well,
they
leave
thought
there.
that it was too much of a transition.
Possibly,
to switch
possibly,
him.
yeah.
Mm.
It's a fair point. But the thing is, I mean, we can have this conversation because the guys have, they put their hands up in the games we've had this season and said, I'm not. They haven't demanded to be selected, but they've certainly demanded to be included in the conversation.
Who did he mention? Luke McGrath,
Cathal Marsh,
Van der Fleer.
Van der Fleer, and
Cathal Marsh.
Gary Ringrose.
I don't think Cathal Marsh is going to see much, as I said, with 2 other 10s possibly starting in European games. I don't know if you never know.
And don't forget,
I might see him on the bench.
will we have Roy Keane's dog playing on?
Mr. Triggs.
Yeah, on Friday night.
Yeah, I'm sure you will. I was surprised we didn't see him.
I was
Friday on the
looking
bench.
I was looking at some of the pictures of him. He looks like a badass.
Good.
He really does.
Yeah, he's mean and evil like a little old ball.
I just hope he doesn't look like a badass and turn out to be a flower arranger. But he certainly looks like that kind of guy. We need that bit of dirt in there.
And get sent off at least once every 4 games.
At least a yellow card would be nice.
To
Well,
show he's interested.
I think that in the 4 games,
Although in fairness, Ross Maloney has played very, very well. Sorry, go on.
in the 4
Right,
games
yeah.
that we've seen of Ringrose,
Mhm.
I still think he's by far our best chance of somebody that's going to come in the long term and replace O'Driscoll.
Where does that fit in the Irish? Like jumping on 2 years and when we're building for another World Cup, is it going to be Henshaw and Ringrose, Henshaw and Stuart McCluskey?
Do you know
Is
there was-
Henshaw gonna
there was
go to
odds-
13?
There was
Stuart,
odds.
what about Olding?
Holding,
There's a lot of young guys, a lot of
There
talented
was
guys.
there was
around.
odds
Stay
on
fit.
Ringrose when he was in school being on the Lions tour in 2017.
Do they have the talent to be demanded to be included in the conversation? Yes. Does that take them onto the pitch at the start? I'm not sure. Does it take them onto the bench? I can't see why not.
In a home game, against, but then again in this competition, who's going to be the weak team? It's not too long. It's probably not Wasps, and it's definitely not Bath. So
Process of elimination.
Where are you going to get that weak
Look,
side?
once we come out of our group, it's obviously easy towards the final because we've beaten all them behind us.
Well, we shall see, boys. Listen, thanks very much again.
Oh, and the new John Grant album is excellent, by the way. Carry on.
And thanks very much for watching. Cheers.